Hi everybody, this is Laura, City Scrapper. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel today. Today I have a layout that I made for a Punched Out Thursday to die for. In this collaboration, we use our dies and our punches to create layouts. These are some of the dies and punches that I used on this layout, and I will be talking about them as we go along. In order to create this layout, I'm using a Recollections pad that I got in Michael's quite a while back. I don't even see these pads anymore, but that's just my Michael's. It might still be available. And the name of the pad is Key West. And I was very attracted by all of the bright colors and the tropical feel of this collection. This yellow piece of paper is We Are Memory Keepers paper that I had in my stash. I was recently cleaning out my scrapbooking room and I came across a number of papers that I really liked, and this was one of them. So I decided to use the yellow paper on this layout. I thought it went really well with the Recollections pad. So I started with a green piece of paper that's going to get covered up, and I'm going to use that to attach everything to. I make a border of the yellow pattern paper. I'm going to use that yellow paper again on the layout. I put a thin border of white around this pattern paper, and I know that it has this big gold title in the center, but you're not going to see that on my layout. I was more interested in using the florals that are around the outside, and if I ever want to use the paper, there are 2 sheets of it in the pad, so I could always use the other sheet. So I cut out 2 circles using my Creative Memories circle cutters. I cut out the yellow one a little bit smaller than the white one, and I attached everything together with some ATG adhesive. And now I have all of my papers layered together, and I'm ready to work on my photo. I'm mounting my photo on some white cardstock. The photo that I'm using is from a trip that my family made to the botanical gardens a few years ago. I also mount my photo on this red and blue pattern paper that was from the pad. And that's going to be the general composition of my layout. Now I'm going to be working on the embellishments that I'm going to put on my layout. Some of the embellishments I fussy cut from some of the pattern papers. The leaf that I was just holding, that blue leaf, that is fussy cut, as well as all the flowers that are on the top of that cutting mat there. And all of the items that look like fern leaves, those were all made using dies. I used 3 different dies and die sets. The largest leaf is an IO die, and there was no name on that die, but I'll put the information I do have in the description box. I also use an Alinacutle die. That is a die from a store in AliExpress. They make their own original dies. And then I also used a Spellbinders die set, and it is called Ferns. And there were 4 different fern branches in that set. I used 3 of them. Oh, and I almost forgot, I used a punch to make some of the leaves. It's off to the left, it's a maroon color, and it's an Imagination, and that's spelled with an E, punch. In order to bring a little extra pop of color to all of these embellishments, I used some Distress Oxide and I inked the edges. So for all of the yellow flowers, and there were just flowers, there were no leaves. For all the yellow flowers, I used fossilized amber. For everything that's orange, I used spice marmalade. Picked raspberry for the pink flowers. I used pine needles for the green branches, and then I used prize ribbon to ink the edges of everything that's blue, and I also used the prize ribbon to ink the edges of the cardstock that's around the photo. My camera stopped recording, but I did put a thick piece of cardboard behind the photo just to make it a little bit more sturdy. Then I cut some fun foam to size. I attached it to the back of the photo. I put some adhesive on it and I attached it down to the left side of that large circle. Now I'm going to begin working on my title. My title is going to be Garden Flowers. I purchased a number of dies from Elizabeth Craft Designs. They had a huge Black Friday sale, and this die set was only $1. And I really wasn't sure what I was going to use it for when I bought it, but I bought a whole bunch of the titles because I figured that even if I couldn't use all the words together, that I could use the individual words. So this one is called My Garden Flowers. I'm not using the my, but I'm using the garden flowers, and I'm sure there'll be occasions in the future when I could use just the word garden or just the word flowers. And I really like this font, and I love the way there are very large flourishes that are made with some of the letters. So I cut out each of the words, both garden and flowers, and I cut them out 4 times using some 120-pound cardstock. And then I layered them on top of each other and glued them together using some gel glue. And then I also cut a piece of light pink pattern paper and I attached that to the top. And then I let all those layers dry really well. And once they were dry, I came back in with some Distress Oxide, and I'm using those same colors that I used before. On the top, I'm using the picked raspberry, and on the bottom, I'm using spiced marmalade. And I add quite a few layers of these Distress Oxides because the colors that are on the layout are pretty intense. They're very bright, and I wanted to make sure that the title didn't pale in comparison to the rest of the colors that were on the layout. So I added quite a few applications of the Distress Oxide. I didn't really have a plan for how I was going to add all of those florals, so I decided to start by adding some photo corners. I used my EK Success scalped photo corner punch, and I punched out some yellow photo corners using the scraps of paper that were left over after I cut out the circle. And I'm inking the edges of all of the photo corners with the spiced marmalade. Now I'm adding yet another layer of the Distress Oxides to the title just to make sure that it's nice and bright and intense. And now I'm going to start layering those flowers on the layout. And this layout turns out to be a lot busier than layouts that I normally make. I just feel that sometimes you have to do something a little bit different. I don't often use such a busy pattern paper in the background, but this paper just really appealed to me and I wanted to try something a little bit different. I started to make a cluster on top of where I plan to put the title. I have a few different flowers that were on that pattern paper. I think they're hibiscus flowers. There's a pink one and an orange one in that cluster. And then I just use a variety of the other florals and I try to vary the colors. And then I started putting the cluster below the title, and I did the same thing. I have one of the pink flowers, an orange flower, and then I added in the same types of leaves. And the clusters aren't identical, but I did try to use a lot of the same colors in all of them. Now I have a cluster over to the left and it kind of goes all the way around by the time I'm done. It's on top of the photo and then off to the left-hand side of the photo as well. Last week, I scrapbooked a photo that was taken the same day that we took this photo. It's from a trip that my family made to the New York Botanical Gardens, and it was during the time there was an exhibit there by Dale Chihuly, who is an artist who makes these beautiful glass sculptures, and they looked very beautiful, incorporated into all of the flowers and the plants at the Botanical Gardens. And a number of people commented on the YouTube video and on my Instagram account of how they have seen Chihuly's work and how they like it so much. And it inspired me to look at my photos and find another photograph of his sculptures. And I wanted to use a photo that was vertical. So I chose this one and I thought that it went fairly well with the papers that I'm using. Now, these are the clusters that I'm going to be using, and of course a few things get moved around a little bit between now and the end of my layout, but I wanted to pop up some of the flowers. So for this top cluster, I am popping up the pink flower and also the yellow flower. I'm just putting a little bit of the fun foam on the back of those two flowers, and I just thought that it would add a little bit of interest to the page to have some of the flowers popped up and then some of them laying flat on the layout. As I was adding those flowers that are popped up to the cluster that's over the title, I moved a few things around. I thought that the cluster looked a little bit too busy, so I tried to simplify the positioning of some of those embellishments. I'm also adding some of the flowers to the title. There are some small flowers. One is yellow and one is blue off to the right of the word garden. And I also added a few leaves. And I like to do that. I like to bring embellishments from the rest of the layout and put them either on or right near the title. I think that it helps to bring the whole layout together. So I do the same thing to each of those clusters. I pop up one or two of the flowers. As I said before, this is a very busy layout for me. I don't mind busy layouts, but I felt that there was a lot of color on this layout. A lot of the same colors are repeated, and I thought that I would break that up a little bit by adding some white, very delicate florals. So I have this dye in my stash. I'm afraid I don't know the manufacturer or where you can get this dye, but I have seen very similar dyes on Amazon available in sets, and I like to have this kind of dye on hand. I think that it adds a nice neutral element when it's used in white, and when it's used in other colors, you can create other effects. So this dye is really nice because you can cut it in half and use both halves of the die cut. So I cut them all in half, and then I tuck several of them into each of the clusters. And even though adding additional die cuts to the layout certainly didn't make it any less busy, I do like this addition of white florals to the layout. So far, the only embellishments I've used are paper embellishments, so I wanted to add another material to the layout. I decided that I would add some bling, and I'm using these strips of jewels. I got these in a dollar store near my home, and it's one of those independent dollar stores, but I often see these jewels in strips, and I usually use the white ones, but I had some that had a yellow cast to them, and I thought this was the perfect opportunity to use them. And of course, it would have been a lot better if I had planned on adding these jewels before I added all the embellishments to the page, but it worked out fine. I was able to cut the strips and fit them in between all of the embellishments around the edge of the circle. I liked the addition of the jewels. I thought that they looked nice with all the bright colors on the page. So once I had finished putting the jewels going around the outside of the circle, I decided that I was going to add some jewels to the flowers as well. So I went into my stash and I found a number of jewels, and I match the color of the jewel to the color of the flower that I put it on. So I put the pink jewels on the pink flowers, and the yellow on the yellow, and the blue on the blue. And for the pink and the yellow jewels, I use those traditional rhinestones, those self-adhesive rhinestones. And then for the blue flowers, I had some jewels that they're not faceted, they're just like tiny little domes. And I thought those were particularly pretty, and I liked that they were a little different from the others, so I used those on the blue flowers. I wasn't sure if I should add some jewels to the pattern paper in the background as well, but my thought was that I would just add the jewels to the flowers that are on the yellow circle, and that would help to keep the focus on the center of the layout and on the photo. So here I'm adding some of those blue jewels to the photo corners just for a little final touch, and that completes this layout. Here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for joining me this week for a Punched Out Thursday to Die For. I am so honored to be part of this collaboration, and I hope you will check out the videos of the other ladies who are part of it. There is Ronnie Sue, Kathy, Sonia, and Dorothy, and we have a new addition to our collaboration who is Scrappy Kathy. We look forward to her starting next week. I hope that everybody has a fantastic day, and I hope to see you again next week for another Punched Out Thursday to Die For. Take care. Bye-bye, everybody.